Hi, I'm Chris, and I'm going to tell you about three husbands, a jealous king, and a tragedy of Shakespearean proportion.
Hi, I'm Darren. I have a story that's pure poetry.
Hi, I'm Drew, and I'm going to tell you about how what many consider to be the first science fiction novel was written by a woman.
What do all of these things have to do with the word marry? Find out in this week's episode of History Bluffs. Hello and welcome to another episode of History Bluffs, where truth is stranger than fiction. I want to welcome to the show, it's your host, Alan!
Hello! Welcome again to yet another episode of History Bluffs. I want to thank our armchair historians for introducing themselves. And speaking of introductions, let's introduce Adam. How are you, Adam?
Oh, I'm good. Hey, thanks a lot, Alan. I appreciate the introduction.
Good to have our tech.
Yeah, my cohort tech, not to be missed. We also have Gina in the tech booth tonight.
Hello, everybody. That's as deep as my voice goes.
Nice. No, that works. And we've got a new historian here today, Drew. Drew is in the house. Thank you, Drew, for joining us. Yes. And now that we're done with those introductions, I want to introduce the rules of the game, Adam. Let's bring up that rule card.
There it is, Alan. Games have rules. This is no exception.
This game is no exception because the historians are inspired by the topic at hand. These true stories are going to have to be factual, so if you are not the bluff, you cannot be making up stuff just to make your story that much more interesting. But if you are a bluff, that story, the crux of the story, the premise, must be fictional, and you, the audience, are not allowed to help in discovering who the bluff is, so please do not use Google during the course of this episode. But if you're listening or watching a recording, Google away. You're not going to spoil anything because we're not live at that point. But those are the rules, right, Adam?
Those are the rules. That's it. That's the end of them.
Fantastic. And we have 3 rounds. They're all timed. The first one is 90 seconds. Is that right?
That's right. No, 75 seconds.
Oh, pardon me.
Round.
Pardon me.
Trying
75 seconds. No. That's not this time. I was slipping up. But the second round is a full minute, and the third round is 45 seconds. And at the end, we will determine who is a true armchair historian and who is the history bluff.
Indeed.
And hey, you know what, Adam? Without further ado, let's start that first round right now.
Let's do it. Let's go to round 1. There we are.
Oh, fantastic. Well, Drew, it's your first show, so I'm going to give you the honor and have you open up round 1 with your topic.
Alan, we need to tell them what the topic is.
Oh, well, you want to know, and if you hadn't figured it out...
Yeah, I kind of said it at the top.
You hadn't figured it out. The topic today is marry.
It is. Uh-oh. All right, there we go. All right, so are we ready, Alan, to start round 1?
Yeah, let's do it. Come on.
All right.
Boom.
Drew, it starts now, Drew.
Mary Shelley was born in 1797 to William Godwin, a political philosopher. Her mother was Mary Wollstonecraft, a famous radical who wrote a vindication of the rights of women. Sadly, Mary never knew her mother. She died 10 days after giving birth to Mary. Nonetheless, Mary was still profoundly influenced by her mother's ideas, which her father praised and influenced. He even taught young Mary how to read by tracing the letters on her mother's gravestone. Mary was obsessed with her mother and sought to reclaim her from the grave. When she wrote, she reimagined the past and recast the future in a doomed effort to resurrect the dead. Publicly, her mother's image had been tarnished even before Mary was born. She had had many sexual affairs and even had a child out of wedlock before meeting William. This illegitimate child named Fanny was the most notorious bastard of the era. William adopted Fanny when he married Wollstonecraft and raised both Mary and Fanny in the same household. Like Mary, Fanny never recovered from the loss of her mother. Flash forward a bit, Mary, now 16, wants to follow in her mother's footsteps. When she meets 21-year-old Percy Shelley, they fall in love, but guess what? He's married.
Wow. I count 3 Marys in that story.
Yes.
One of them was the marriage,
Yes.
and the other 2 was the mother-daughter relationship. Chris, what'd you think of that story?
I think it's scandalous, just outright scandalous. But I picked up on the father's name being William and the mother's name being Mary. I think this is an idea that Drew came up with in college, inspired at William and Mary College. I think he just. I'm very skeptical. He's got an awful lot of facts, and so I'm going to see what he says in round 2.
Interesting. Yes. Drew, I want to hear your take
On his own story?
on Drew's story. What did you think of Drew's story? Is it valid?
Yeah.
Darren.
You said
Oh,
Drew.
did I not say?
You said
I
Drew.
said Drew.
Oh, valid.
Doggone it. Now I understand the joke. Well, for that, Darren, we're not going to listen to you. I want to hear Drew's opinion on his own story now.
All right, I want to hear it.
Yeah. Let's do it.
Now, Darren, what do you think? What, it was Drew telling the truth?
Well, I think Drew, I know it's your first time, but I don't think it was adequately explained that we don't get paid for each time we say the name of the topic. Nor do we get paid in any way.
It's
Also
a drinking game.
Also true.
That's also
Oh,
fair.
if, in that case.
Oh, there he goes. Take a drink every time you say Mary. Okay. Fair enough. Darren's name is Darren. Oh. Okay, good to know. Thank you. I need to know these things.
Thank you.
All right, so
I didn't know that either.
because I got Darren's name wrong, let's have Darren start round 1 right now with a big old shot from our cannon.
All right, coming up.
All right. Mary had a little lamb. Its fleece was white as snow. No matter where you grew up, it's a poem that you know. Stop laughing. But did you know Sarah Josepha Hale, who penned those famous words? To 5 presidents she sent mail, not about lambs, but about birds. For Sarah was not just a writer of stories. She fought for people and causes with no care for her glory. She was an activist, a warrior, a supporter of sailors. She wrote Fillmore and Pierce and Buchanan and Taylor. But when none of them listened and none of them cared, she wasn't put off. No, she wasn't scared. She kept on writing to get the job done, and finally she did when she wrote Abe Lincoln. She asked Honest Abe to use his high rank to commemorate a day sometime in November for all of us to gather and say a few thanks. Share food and share drinks, but mostly remember. Though she's famous for lamb and she's no longer living, Sarah Josepha Hale is the mother of Thanksgiving.
What? That's crazy. That's crazy. Now, Darren, I'm not going to ask you the opinion of your story. I'm going to ask Drew his opinion
That's a
on
good
Darren's
idea.
story. Drew, what do you think?
The poetic license, I question that. So right just off out of the gate, and there was
I don't have a license.
nothing rhymes with Lincoln, I guess. I don't know, but
Not really.
Drinking.
already I'm suspect.
Oh, okay. Fair. Chris, let's hear your take on Darren's story.
Yeah, we're all improvisers here, and Darren did the classic move of okay, the suggestion is Mary. He threw out a line about Mary, and then he just basically said, "Oh, that's the equivalent of getting Mom on stage and saying thanks, Mom," and then turning to the audience and doing whatever you want on the rest of the scene." So he completely dropped the topic, and he went down a path of presidents and birds, and I'm trying to see how he weaves the rest of this yarn.
Fair enough. Okay. Well, Chris, Now that we've got the other two historians out of the way for round one, it's your turn to give your take on the topic at hand, which is Mary. And listen for that cannon shot, because here it comes.
All right. This is the tragic story of Camille Varicalli, known in 1930s and 40s as Italy's Merry Widow. But we begin almost 300 years earlier. The Savoy family ruled the island nation-state of Sardinia, an island close to and slightly smaller than Sicily. In 1665, King Victor Emmanuel, remember that name, unified multiple city-states into what we now know as Italy. Fast forward 250 years, Camille Varicalli was from a small fishing village in Sardinia and was known locally as the most beautiful woman on the island. She married her longtime neighbor, Joseph Colucci. They had grown up together and they were madly in love. Sadly, he died fighting in World War I. Grief-stricken, she found comfort in local, in the people that she knew closest, and one of them was his brother Carlo. They would take these long walks and talk about their memories of Joseph. They fell in love and they married, causing a bit of a stir, as you might imagine, locally. She didn't care. She was happy, and she soon earned the nickname the Merry Widow. Unfortunately for Camille, her story caught the attention of the king, a descendant of Victor Emmanuel, and I'll get to that in round two.
Oh. The Merry Widow. Darren, what say you?
I was struck to hear about the small fishing village in Sardinia. So I guess Chris thinks that to catch small fish, sardines, you have to have a small, tiny little village that maybe would fit in a sardine tin.
Interesting. A tiny canned village. Drew, what do you think about the Merry Widow?
I want to know more about this Victor Emmanuel. We got cut off at the end there, but he said to remember that name, and I did, and I feel like that's where the story is going to take a turn.
That makes perfect sense. I wrote it down, too. I don't know what that has to do with the topic of Mary, but hopefully by round three we'll find out, right?
I hope.
All right. Well, we can't get to round three unless we get to round two, Adam.
Oh, my God, that's right. We do have to get to round two, Alan. Okay, let's do that. There it is, as promised. It's round two.
Woo!
We are in round two, as you can see above your head in the round tracker 9200.
That's right. That's how I know that we're done with the rounds. So as you watching us on YouTube and Twitch, you can see that we finished round one. Here's round two, yet to be checked off. And by the way, I'm going to switch up the order now. I'm going to bring up Darren first. Darren's going to... Yeah,
Do you mean
right.
me or Drew?
I mean you, Darren.
Okay.
Not Drew. Drew got to go first already.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
That's true.
So Darren, you now get to go first. Not Chris. No,
Not
sorry.
Chris.
That's later.
It's
That's round three.
I'm getting busy.
Darren, I want to hear more about your Mary Had a Little Lamb, who apparently wrote for Abraham Lincoln, I guess. I don't know.
All right, let's do it.
Okay, so Sarah Hale, who is probably most famous for writing Mary Had a Little Lamb, was actually an activist and a feminist way back in the 1820s. And at a time when women couldn't vote and most women weren't even educated, Sarah Hale was not only a poet, she was also a novelist who wrote over a dozen books. She was the editor of Ladies' Magazine and Literary Gazette. She also founded the Seamen's Aid Society in 1833. She even wrote a novel that espoused to have slaves freed and sent back to live in Africa in Liberia, which had just been founded. In the 1850s, she started writing and lobbying for women to enter the workforce, and she became an early advocate of women in higher education. And in 1861, she even helped found Vassar College. And she somehow managed to do all this while having 5 children, and even had the time to lobby 5 different presidents, asking them to make Thanksgiving an official national holiday.
Wow. Interesting. All right. Drew, who is not Darren, but I'd like to hear Drew's opinion on Darren on what he just said.
Well, if this story is true, my whole life has been a scam because Mary Had a Little Lamb was written by Mother Goose, and we all know that. We all know that. Unless Mother Goose is a name, is Sarah Hale's, like, what do you call it?
A pen name?
Nom de plume?
A pen name.
She did have 5 children.
Did they live in a shoe?
She didn't know what to do.
Just
Okay.
beautiful.
So I'm watching.
Just
You watch him closely, Drew, because he's slippery, that one. Chris, what do you think?
Yeah, I'm. He threw out a bunch. Once again, he's great for throwing out a bunch of details. I mean, so she wrote about Thanksgiving to Fillmore, Pierce, Buchanan, Taylor, and Lincoln. I applaud her persistence, because theoretically, that 5 presidents, that could be anywhere from 20 to 30 something years, or longer than that, actually, depending on how many terms they've served. So having 5 children in the middle of all that, founding Vassar College, writing the Mary Had a Little Lamb, all this other stuff, I find it hard to believe that she would stay that persistent with something that was clearly not big on the radar of politicians at the time, and kept up that persistence, but all the other stuff going on in her life.
Okay. Fair enough. You know what else is fair enough, Chris, is giving you the opportunity to go in round 2. So I'm going to give you the shot right now. And speaking of shots, here comes a cannon shot.
Okay, so young widow Camille married her former brother-in-law Carlo and earned the nickname the Merry Widow. A story about their wedding had a photo of Camille, and that grabbed the attention of King Victor Emmanuel VI, the descendant of the first Victor Emmanuel, who was now in power. The king became obsessed with her beauty. As bad luck would have it for this poor woman, Camille, Carlo died less than a year later from some form of food poisoning called scombroid poisoning, something related with toxins. And King Victor Emmanuel VI assumed that this was his chance. He began inviting Camille to events at his royal court, and nobody could figure out why. She was not royalty, but the king was obsessed, and he dismissed any kind of question about why she was there. However, the king's plan backfired, because the young widow Camille, now 2 times over widow, she actually fell in love with the king's son, Prince Umberto.
Well, we've got a revisit of King Victor Emmanuel. What do you say, Drew?
This sounds like a next Disney movie to me. There's a lot going on here. Yeah. I'm
hearing that. Darren, what do you think?
It's hard to argue with Victor Emmanuel VI being a descendant of Victor Emmanuel I. I don't think that's a really difficult point. But all this talk about toxins sounds like something my massage therapist would discuss. Like, we're getting all the toxins out. Make sure you drink a lot of water afterwards. I think Chris just had a massage and is feeling good and remembered all the toxins that were released.
Ooh is right. And I would get a big ooh if I forgot our new Drew historian in round 2. So, Drew, we're going to give you the ooh and start you with a boom.
Okay, Mary and Percy, they run away together. It's a big scandal. Her father refuses to speak to her. She's called a whore. Percy's called a scoundrel. The friends turn their backs on them. And even worse, she's pregnant, but her baby dies after only 3 days. Jump to 1816, which is known as the year without a summer. Mount Tambora had erupted in Indonesia, spewing ash into the atmosphere and disrupting weather patterns across the globe. The whole world was dark and gloomy. They decide to go to Geneva, where the air is supposed to be better, and they meet up with other rejected writers from London. After weeks of cold, rainy weather, they grow bored and restless. To kill time, they create a contest to see who can come up with the scariest ghost story. Everyone fails except Mary, who strikes gold with the first sentence. It was a dreary night of November that I beheld my man completed. Mary drew on her own experiences as a child whose mother had died after giving birth. Her father had rejected her and society had condemned her. She learned her sister had committed suicide.
Oh. So again, the premise of the story can be false. Just because you know that Mary Shelley wrote Frankenstein doesn't mean that this is not a bluff. All this other stuff could be completely made up. Chris, what do you think?
Well, speaking of Disney movies, Drew, your story is not a Disney movie with the horror and all the other things and all the death. However, I did have some questions. My biggest thing was the thing that jumped out to me was they met. Was it in Sweden where they met all the other rejected writers from London? Like, was that a thing that the summer there was the year without a summer, 1816. And what we decided to do is, okay, we're going to reject your book and you're off to Sweden. Everybody that was rejected as a writer is going to Sweden. It's a very interesting detail that makes no sense in the overall scheme of his story. And also, I just realized that I apparently missed the memo about poetry. I thought it was Mary, Mary, Mary with the topic, because they're both now working off of poems. So.
I would like to point out that Darren's second round did not rhyme like his first round.
Oh.
True. Good point.
Zing.
Good
True.
point.
Okay.
You're there. That is it.
That is a zinger. Okay. Darren, what was your take?
Boy, that was a dreary second round. Like, there's no summer. Everybody was depressed. They went to Europe and probably drank a lot. I haven't really heard a story like that gothic since the last time I went to Independent Bar, which was probably 20 years ago.
All right. Well, let's check the round tracker there, Adam. Is it? Yeah, it's a full round.
Oh,
Well, that
my
can only
God.
mean one thing, Adam.
We're going to round 3.
All right. And just a reminder, if you are observing this episode live, you are welcome to comment your opinions on who's bluffing, who's not bluffing, or even just little nuggets of wisdom that you took away from anyone's individual story.
Heck, bluff
And-
yourself. Why not? Let's hear.
Yeah, let's hear your own bluff. I want to hear some random audience members bluffing. That'd be pretty awesome. But you know what else would be pretty awesome is if Chris, I believe it's Chris, who has not yet been able to start the round. Chris,
That would be correct, Alan.
you get to go first now, and we want to hear you wrap up your story of the Merry Widow.
Okay. So, King Victor Emmanuel VI was incensed that the object of his affection had fallen for his own son. Feeling betrayed, the jealous King Victor sent Prince Umberto off to lead an army regiment, but his plan once again backfired as the king himself soon died from complications of a heart condition. Umberto returned to the capital as the newly crowned king, and he married Camille, and the paparazzi had a field day. She was once again dubbed the Merry Widow. Now she was a widow 2 times over, but remarried and was still very, very happy. So they very meanly called her the Merry Widow. But as Shakespeare himself might have written, this was all happening just as Benito Mussolini rose to power. Mussolini and his troops overthrew the monarchy and killed both King Umberto and Camille. Never got to destroy her marriage.
Wow.
Wow. Drew, what do you think of Chris's finale there?
That took a turn. That took a turn for sure. I was expecting a happy ending for the Merry Widow, Camille. Feel bad for her now. Feel bad.
Yeah, she's not so merry after all.
Yeah.
Okay, Darren, what do you think?
I'm just sad. I mean, this whole Merry Widow thing's a big lie.
Yeah, she's not merry. This
No,
is not a merry
was.
story
She's more like
whatsoever.
a buried widow.
She
Yeah, she is. She's a buried widow. You know what? I'm not going to
History-
bury.
History's not always happy.
No, that is true. Speaking of not merry, Drew, as a macabre story that was written from fiction and maybe inspired by some true tragedies. We don't know, but let's hear it wrap up here.
Okay, so Mary spent 2 years revising the story, published Frankenstein in 1818 when she was only 20 years old. Readers were shocked Who could write such a terrible story about a mad scientist creating life and attempting to play God? The critics called it horrible and disgusting, and the author must be as mad as his hero. You see, at first, Frankenstein was published anonymously. When people discovered the author's name, it was more scandalous than the story itself. The author was a woman? Women weren't supposed to write stories, especially one like Frankenstein. In Frankenstein, Mary hints at the many ties that she felt to the novel. Like the creature, she felt abandoned by the creator and rejected by society. Like Frankenstein, she was compelled to create. Her own birth had caused the death of her mother, and she had brought life to her characters.
Ooh, poetic. She brought death to her mother. Oh my goodness. I want to hear Chris's opinion. What do you think, Chris?
Very poetic indeed, and I once again applaud Drew on his dramatic delivery, and well done on that. But I'm going to save my final comments until after I hear Darren's. But I think once again, this is a classic History Bluff move of telling us on the periphery a story that either we know or we're familiar with, and throwing in a lot of details, and then having it all of a sudden be revealed as, wait a minute, that was the bluff.
Oh, Darren, what do you think?
I'm still sad from the earlier story. And now I'm more sad from that story.
Oh.
Sadness happens, Darren.
Sad.
History happens. Speaking of history, we want to hear your recount of history right now. Darren, not Drew. No, Darren. Thank you. Darren, are you ready?
Drew is ready. And Darren's
Well,
ready.
Drew might be, but he's done. So let's hear your final story right now.
Okay, so not only did Sarah Hale write Mary as a Little Lamb and lead the effort to make Thanksgiving a national holiday, she may actually be responsible for what you eat for Thanksgiving dinner. In her novel Northwood, or A Tale of New England, she devotes an entire chapter to describing all the dishes of Thanksgiving, like roasted turkey, gravy, stuffing, pumpkin pie, all that stuff. And in the late 1800s, the magazine she worked for, Ladies Magazine, was the de facto women's magazine. It had circulation of over 150,000, and as editor, she influenced American style like nobody else at the time. And people everywhere, women everywhere, copied what she did. And so you could say she was like the Kim Kardashian of her time.
Wow. The author of Mary Had a Little Lamb?
And yet all we remember her for is Mary Had a Little Lamb.
Interesting. Chris, what do you think?
I think Darren just gave himself away in his last comment after the story had finished. I picked up, because I take notes when other people are telling their stories here. He, in either his first sentence or related to his second sentence, each round, he said Mary Had a Little Lamb. Driving home, hey, I'm talking about Mary Had a Little Lamb. And then he was kind of bringing in all this other stuff. So he was weaving this big yarn about 5 presidencies and all the stuff that she did over the course of 40, 50 years. But he was, I picked up that he mentioned. So not only did she write Mary Had a Little Lamb, he said it a couple of times. So not only did he say Mary Had a Little Lamb, but he was making the rest up.
And what is yarn made from, Chris? Made from wool. Where does that come from? Sheep.
Sheep.
What does that have to do with lambs?
Oh,
I don't
Gina.
know.
Just
I don't know, Gina.
Gina, we'll have to have a little talk after the show. Drew, what do you think?
I find it interesting that if she influenced Thanksgiving, why they didn't serve lamb. That's really kind of
Right.
Well,
Great
obviously.
point. Great
Yeah.
point.
Because it's mean.
That's a little bit of an insensitive.
So that's where the story starts to unravel for me a little bit.
Yes.
Unravel.
Pulling the thread. Okay. Well,
Amazing.
everyone's had their shot. Everyone's had their stories. I want to hear everyone's opinion on who they think is the bluff. What do you think, Chris?
Well, I had a lot, I think, peripheral holes in some of Drew's content. But it came down to me, I feel like I'm going to have to say I think Darren is bluffing because again, he did the red herring where he says, I'm going to talk about Mary had a little lamb, and then he started talking about some other stuff, and he talked about Vassar College and Fillmore, Pierce, Buchanan, Taylor, and Lincoln, and all these guys, and presidents for decades of presidencies, and I just don't. I think Darren is bluffing.
Fair. Drew, what's your opinion?
I was kind of leaning that way too, but now I think about it, Chris is over here, saying how my story sounds just too good to be true, and he could have quote a almost completely true story and just thrown in like one fact that wasn't true. So I feel like I'm gonna say Chris is actually the.
Oh wow!
Interesting.
Right.
We have a vote for Chris. We have a vote for Darren. Darren, what do you think?
I think the only true thing in Chris's story was the fact that Victor Emmanuel VI was descended from Victor Emmanuel I.
Okay.
And that little nugget of truth is the thing he thought would carry him all the way through his story. It's a complete fabrication.
All right, so we have 2 votes for Chris. Both Darren and Drew think that Chris is bluffing, but we have a vote for doggone it. We have a vote for Darren. We have a vote for Darren, but and that was Chris, right? Chris, you were the one that thought Darren was bluffing?
Correct.
Just my mind's all over the place
There it is.
today. Thank you.
You need a whiteboard. You need a whiteboard.
I know. I've got a notepad too. I should be
It works.
writing this stuff down as well. But that
It's
means
one
no
piece
one...
of paper.
That's right. No one voted for Drew, which means Drew, if you were bluffing, you are the outright winner for this episode.
Wow.
And but I don't know who the bluff is, so I'm going to leave this up to our tech Adam.
All right. I, in fact, do have the ultimate truth. The truth tonight, and I will reveal, was your bluff. Was it Darren? Was your bluff Chris? Or could your bluff have been Drew? I will reveal it now. Your bluff this whole time has been Chris.
Oh! Yes!
Well done. You did get some accusations. You did not get out scot-free. But you
There
did
was one person was correct. Is that right?
2.
Two people.
Was correct.
Everyone who could have been guessing you got it right. Only Chris guessed Darren, but Chris, of course, is going to guess the correct some incorrect. He's going to guess incorrectly.
Come on back onto the
fantastic.
stage, Alan.
I'm back. You know what? I didn't want to show my face after I was flustering my way through that explanation. I think that was great. Good job by Drew. Good job by Darren for figuring out our bluffer. I didn't even know. I was thinking it was Darren, so... Okay, good job. Good job, everybody. Adam, I'm done. Take us out of here.
Oh my God, I will. Is there any? And no one had closing moments for this story. Did everybody reach a completion point? I feel like I learned a lot tonight.
I did too. Chris,
All right.
where'd you get the inspiration for your bluff?
So the woman's name, Camille, what was her name? She actually is a real person, and she's known as the Merry Widow. However, she wasn't in Italy. She was in New York, and she was married to not 3 but 5 different mobsters in New York in the 1980s and 90s. Actually started in the 70s. Her interesting fact: her first husband was the first guy that Sonny the Bull Gravano killed. Unfortunate claim to fame for him.
Yeah, that's too bad.
She has a thing for bad boys.
That's why she was married.
All right.
All right. Well, speaking of
right.
bad boys, Chris is a bad boy because he bluffed this week. And
Yeah,
Adam,
he did.
again, it's
All right.
in your balls in your court.
Okay, man. All right. Thank you, Alan. You've been a magnificent host. Thank you, Gina, up here in the tech booth with me. I appreciate it so much. And everybody, this has been History Bluffs, where truth is stranger than fiction. We will see you next week. Same bat time,